From the CISO Series, it's cybersecurity headlines.
National Public Data Update, now just 1.3 million. Google Pixel devices ship with vulnerable app just in time for the end of its bug bounty, and poisoning LLMs to create insecure code. These are some of the stories that my colleagues and I have selected from this past week's cybersecurity headlines. And now we're ready for some insight, opinion, and expertise from our guest, Bethany De Lude, CISO over at the Carlyle Group. Bethany, thank you so much for making the time, lending us your expertise. I cannot wait to get into the news today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rich. And I'm glad to see that we are cyber coordinated today with our
Our
lemon.
lemon apparel. Yes, we are rocking the lemon apparel, but there is nothing sour about this show except if you don't like cybersecurity news, in which case, I question why you're tuning in. I hope you do like it because we're going to get into some great news. And another great thing we need to get into real quick here is our sponsor for today, Nudge Security. Discover and secure all shadow SaaS. Join us on YouTube Live. To do so, go to CISOSeries.com, hit the events drop down, and look for the cybersecurity headlines week in review image. Click on it to join us, and then you can contribute in our chat. I'm already seeing some messages going around. Hey, we got Tomcat showing up. We got CCL. We have someone without an alias, David Spark, also in the chat. So get in there. Let us know your thoughts. If you can't join us this week, we'd love to see you going forward. We're on at the same time, so you can make it part of your weekend ramp up, I guess, if you want to think of it like that. So we are just about to get into the news. Just a quick reminder that Bethany's opinions are her own, not necessarily those of her employer. So first story here, National Public Data Record leak repercussions. The Florida-based data broker has officially confirmed the number of people impacted by its breach, which happened earlier this year and has been reduced by just a smidge, just a little bit, to 1.3 million from an earlier estimate of 2.9 billion. So maybe just a little bit of a rounding error. The stolen information includes full names, email addresses, phone numbers, and social security numbers. So if you're one of those 1.3 million, you may still have some cause for concern. Still, obviously, some serious data that's out there. Bethany, this story has dominated the headlines for a few weeks now. We're all familiar with National Public Data. I guess they don't even give you a tote bag for a name like that. Clearly, when the number was 2.9 billion, quite a headline grabber. Do you have concerns about alert fatigue with stories like this when it comes to serious security threats? I mean, definitely, it's a great strategy for a threat actor to be able to hide in plain sight if we're all just completely numb to, oh, it's just 1.3 million now.
Yeah, I have to say for me, this story completely triggered some PTSD that was left over from 2015 when my files were leaked by OPM. And
Yes.
yeah, it was a massive data breach. And what you learned is that there were successive releases of the information, the disclosures on what was actually leaked. And I wouldn't be surprised if this story followed a similar path. There have been some security researchers who plowed through the data and think there might be more to it than what was originally reported to the AG in Maine. So I think there's going to be layers to this story. I don't think we've heard the last of it. And I do think that it's going to create work for cyber professionals as different people within their organizations learn that they were part of this breach and maybe looking for some additional like insider baseball on what do I do now that this information is out there. I do agree with the fatigue comment. I literally had coffee with a colleague this week who said his daughter said, well, what's the big deal? There's been so many of these. Who doesn't have my social security number at this point? Well, that's, it's sad that might not be a completely invalid concern, but I know in the OPM case, what no one did have was my fingerprints until after that breach happened. And so with this one, I'll be curious to see if there's anything worse than social security numbers that ends up being part of that data set.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be, right, the social security number was like the most, you would just pray that when you saw a data leak story like this, that wasn't included in there. That was the most sacrosanct of information. But yeah, you're right. I think going forward, biometrics definitely is going to have a much bigger role in that, as it unfortunately does become commonplace that so many people have had these numbers leaked. Yeah, it's shocking to think that, yeah, if you're a teenager now, there's probably never been a time that you haven't seen like data leaks in the millions in the news on a routine basis. Like, just thinking about that is mind-boggling.
Yeah, and I wish the headline would shed some light on why aren't data brokers being held to a higher standard. I mean, this definitely is a theme that we're seeing. A lack of coordinated action at the federal level, whether it's in privacy or specifically with data brokers, and how our data is being used and what should be expected of them from a security perspective.
All right, next up here, Google Pixel devices shipped with vulnerable Verizon app. You know how TVs always look brighter when they're on display at your local electronics store? There's a setting that makes them do that. It's not just, perception. Apparently, phones have something similar. A majority of Google Pixel devices shipped since September 2017, so for a while now, come with a dormant app called Verizon Retail Demo Mode, catchy name, guys, manufactured by a third-party vendor and required by Verizon to be present on all Android devices. Embedded in this app is another app which, according to mobile security firm iVerify, leaves Android Pixel phones susceptible to adversary in the middle attacks. The essence of this story is a form of hidden or legacy software that has a huge potential for spyware and other abuses because it's essentially invisible while simultaneously able to contact all kinds of servers, at least in theory. So, Bethany, how does this make you feel as a CISO, considering that, all employees are susceptible to having hidden demo software that's, been on there for years, on their phones, on their cars? Is this anything unexpected, or I like, how does this play into your kind of risk profile for these types of devices?
Yeah, so for this one, what struck me that was the real head scratcher was that it was in the firmware.
Mhm.
So I think we all expect that the tools that we're provided, that we're using, whether it's in our personal lives or in the business world, are going to have flaws.
Sure.
Patch Tuesday is a thing. Um,
A proud tradition.
a
Yeah.
proud tradition. Yes, I love that. But we like to think that there's some mechanism for us to reduce that risk. And when something is in the firmware, that's a whole different uh, like proposition there, and you
Yeah.
really depended on the provider to have done its diligence before it provided you with something potentially malicious in the firmware. I thought what it was really interesting how Google came out and said, don't worry about it. It requires people to have access to your phone and your password. And of course, there's no malicious software that's ever been fielded that
Oh,
gives you access to a device. So
never.
we're gonna
Oh, heaven forbid. Yeah.
never happened. So great big exhale on that. Yet, so in the same statement where like don't worry about it, it's fine. They also made it clear that it would not be a part of the firmware going forward. So
Well,
kind of
that is transparency for the win there. But
yes,
yeah, the idea of, usually when it comes to, security considerations with bring your own device, it's like, oh, what apps has the user installed, right? Like, that's the conversation. Or
exactly.
how are they using those devices? Another totally different level of consideration when that's, coming essentially from the factory. But this does kind of play
Mhm.
into our next story here, which is Google's Play Store bug bounty program ending this month, and I think there might be some tailwinds linking up here.
Yes.
Uh, Perfect time to bring this up. The company's 7-year-long bug bounty program for Android apps on the Google Play Store set to conclude on August 31st, so next week. It launched in 2017 as the Google Play Security Rewards Program, or GRSIP, initially focused on a select group of developers and apps, and broadened its scope in 2019 to include all apps distributed on the platform. You had payouts up to $20,000, some good incentives there. While termination of the program raises questions about the future of the overall security posture of the Android ecosystem, Google said it will continue to invest in various security initiatives, and that does include the Android Vulnerability Rewards program that focuses, though, on the underlying Android OS, not on necessarily the application layer. So, Bethany, just looking from your perspective, and given that we just saw a firmware-related security backdoor, essentially potential backdoor in there, what's your perspective on why Google would choose to terminate this? We're in tough economic headwinds for some of these companies, maybe not financially viable. And is an Android-based solution a better one?
So with this one, ending the vulnerability, like the bug bounty program, Yes, it's wonderful that they're keeping it, looking at the operating system, but you think about the story we just told in the firmware. Think about, I think it was in May that Microsoft researchers found a large vulnerability that affected a lot of apps that were in the Android store. So it's like, I don't, in those stories, it didn't say, Google itself identified these problems and contacted these app providers. So it is a little puzzling. And again, I like to really look at what the company itself releases, and it said that they weren't finding that many actionable reports. What is that many?
At the scale of Google, when you have the most popular smartphone platform out there. Yeah, what does that as a percentage look like? Right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And how bad? One terrible one that may have come through that door. And of course you look at what are others doing. That's for CISOs like me, you're always asked, what are people in our industry doing? So I pulled up, what is Apple doing, and their bug bounty. And I would say, so if you're not going to get paid finding things in Android any longer, pivot to Apple, because they'll pay you a ton of money, much higher than these other awards. So keep us safe and take your talent there. And they're paying like $150,000 for some really good ones, and they lay it out very prescriptively. So kudos there, and just very, very interesting that this program is being shut down.
I do wonder if this has anything to do with the mandates to essentially open up a lot of the app stores, both for Google and for Apple internationally, specifically in response to European regulation. But I do wonder if it's like, well, it's the Wild West now because anybody can just upload a third-party app store, and we can't do anything anyway. So we might as well focus on hardening the OS, which we still have a control over. I do wonder if that plays maybe a little bit of a role in it, but still. I mean, how much was this costing Google to have bad optics like this from a security perspective? That's my thought. Like, this is a like couch cushion money for them at this point.
Exactly. And maybe if you had some type of a program, you maybe restructure it to not saying, go out there and dox people who put out insecure apps, but some platform for making, having people report this information as kind of like a, consumer.
Bethany, now Google is going to have a program that doxes people for making insecure apps, and they're going to be like, well, we heard about it. And first of all, Google, thank you for listening. I do appreciate that.
Exactly.
You heard
I don't think I'll get an award and any type of monetary fee for that suggestion.
All right. Well, before we move on to our next story, we have to spend a few moments with our sponsor for today, Nudge Security. When your CEO asks, hey, are we using that SaaS app that was just breached? How quickly and confidently can you answer? Stop guessing with Nudge Security. Discover all SaaS accounts ever introduced by anyone in your org in minutes and get alerted when any SaaS app used in your org is breached. Start a 14-day trial now at nudgesecurity.com/SaaS. That's NUDGESECURITY.com/SaaS. Next up here, man who hacked Hawaii State Registry sentenced. In January 2023, Kentucky man Jesse Kimpf used stolen login credentials to access the Hawaii Death Registry system and certified his own death. The creds belonged to a physician who worked for a local hospital but had left his job in 2021. By certifying his own death records, Kimpf avoided paying more than $116,000 in child support. Sounds like a stand-up guy. Hawaii's Department of Health sent breach notices to impacted individuals after cybersecurity firm Mandiant found the credentials had been sold on the dark web. Kimpf also hacked into other state death registry systems and governmental and corporate networks, then sold stolen data to customers in locations like Russia, Algeria, and Ukraine. On Monday, he was sentenced to 81 months in prison. So, Bethany, props to this guy for performing not one, but two crazy stunts that scream, hey, authorities, I'm over here. First, he brings the art of faking one's own death into the 21st century, but then he goes and sells the data he found while haunting the state of Hawaii. According to Google Translate, the way to say bad idea in Hawaiian is mana o ino. This is a cute story, but behind it is the fact that, once again, personal data can be abused in many seemingly creative ways. And also, what about that physician who left? Why did no one close that account? Sounds like an offboarding issue there. I'm curious, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I went right there, right to that last point, which was 2021. The person offboarded, and then so you have, and you saw that with Snowflake.
Yeah.
A lot, people leaving credentials that are stale, alive and working. So that was one aspect of the story that stood out to me. And then also, I have to say, tip of the hat to the judge. That
hmm
was, I wouldn't like to spend almost 7 years in prison. I think that's, not a pleasant way to spend your day. So I thought that was a good signal. I also thought that maybe there's even more that can be done in that area because when you say, wire fraud, which is typically what these cases and cases like this are prosecuted under, but he sold information to Russia. Is that something bigger than wire fraud? Does that fall into, you look at how the intelligence community is extending its, um, the intelligence bill will put ransomware actors into the category of terrorists, nation and get nation state sanctions, things like this.
hmm
Well, if you had someone domestic who does this, is there a different charge that it doesn't sound as, not that wire fraud sounds benign, obviously it doesn't, and, but it feels like we really need to up the ante here.
Yeah, because this is some pretty nefarious. And I mean, just think of in terms of like, I don't know if you want to just less so for like obtaining information, but more so just to just messing with someone's social security or something like that by like being able to forge death certificates or just make make their day hard, like for targets that you're trying to stress out, to make mistakes, to do all this sort of stuff, to set up a perfect social engineering situation for a lot of these people, taking them completely out of their comfort zone. I think for threat actors, with advanced threats that would be operating in those countries, yeah, I definitely think maybe a time to review that type of punitive action for sure.
Mhm.
All right, next up here, poisoning LLMs to create insecure code. You thought we weren't going to talk about something AI related. We got you. Don't worry. We saved it for the back end. At the Usenix Security Symposium, a team of academic researchers presented details of Codebreaker, a set of techniques to poison large language model training sets to make them more likely to suggest vulnerable code. This saw the researchers systematically create code samples that don't register as malicious with static analysis tools. This builds on previous research that used malicious code in comments and then split workloads to introduce vulnerabilities into training sets. Those were tripping static analysis tools. So this is the advancement here with the Codebreaker research. Of course, this kind of poisoning isn't new. Research has previously found malicious code. You see it on Stack Overflow tutorials from time to time. And given the lack of quality control when ingesting code scraped from the internet, vulnerable code suggestions are already a reality in these training sets. What Codebreaker does is it tries to make it a higher percentage in terms of that poisoning, right? To give you a higher percentage of bad answers. So Bethany, this story basically writes its own questions. Humans, being who they are, we're all familiar with them, are finding creative ways to make LLMs do what they want and not what they were supposed to do necessarily. In your role, how do you approach this?
Yeah, I think it's one of those situations. Up front, you said that it's not new that when you're getting code from open source, you're not, and humans make mistakes in
Sure.
code. So I think the trick here is that is to make sure that the right things continue to happen, so that you have code reviews, that things like that, both human and machine. And it'll be nice when these machines are able to, instead of just develop code at machine speed, but assess code at machine speed. So kind of turn the equation back, like to use tooling to help us do things better. And I think on this one, in the earlier question, we talked about notice fatigue
Mhm.
on, with our personal information being disclosed left and right. I think this is where I worry about fatigue, which is coders, because so much we hear about what we get out of these toolings is faster coding. Junior people can now perform like more senior development people and faster,
Mhm.
is that they become fatigued at the due diligence steps. Like, why? Yeah, this is the next greatest thing. This is here to accelerate me. But you need to pause and do that critical thinking step as well.
Yeah, that's I think where a lot of more seasoned coders are critical of this kind of stuff. Yeah, it's not having that kind of that learned institutional knowledge, for lack of a better term, right? To know when, well, I mean, you should always be reviewing your code, but like to have that sense, right? To be able to see stuff that, again, is not going to necessarily show up on scanners, even if it's not malicious, but just when we're talking about inefficiencies, when we're talking about accidental data leakages and that kind of stuff. There's a whole we cover on the show a whole bevy of ways that software can go wrong on a routine basis. And so so being able to hit that scale and kind of waiting on that back end for to have it maybe a machine assisted review system. I'm always skeptical when the solution is we need to use LLMs to do the LLM things better. It could just becomes turtles all the way down very quickly for me. But as long as we have humans in the loop, right? If there's a foundation of like human
Exactly.
expertise and reason, I still feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, and something I say just to add on that, like something for like CISOs to think about is to get those stories of when a more seasoned developer, identified something in the generated code that wasn't quite right, and to showcase those and give case studies to keep reminding people, like the human at the end of the day is who's ultimately accountable.
Yeah, this isn't a magical productivity and upskilling
Yes.
like with no reservation system yet. Maybe someday. Maybe someday. All right, and our final story of today, we kind of got a double one here to finish off the show with. It's What Could Possibly Go Wrong edition of headlines here. Two stories this week from Microsoft that I got to look over the old metaphorical glasses. Let me get them out here in a way that makes me say, what are we thinking? First, Microsoft is deploying an updated version of its recall feature, which has been announced and then recalled earlier this year. You may have thought of that news story, with industry analysts deriding it as a keylogger or spyware, maybe a little hyperbolic, but certainly had some privacy reservations about it. Microsoft has not fully clarified how the new version will differ, but has said it will include just-in-time decryption and that Windows insiders would need a Copilot Plus PC to do that. I'm assuming that has something to do with the NPU hardware. Secondly, Microsoft is announcing a unified Teams app that connects personal, work accounts, and work accounts, which allows Windows and Mac users to switch between personal, work, and education accounts without installing multiple apps, and also helps users switch between accounts without signing out and signing in again, and allows them to join meetings without logging into an account. So, Bethany, given that everything CISOs and their teams do is about understanding risk to make things more secure, especially by compartmentalizing things and insisting things like, passwords, have a function or some, whatever kind of authentication we have out there. What about these products causes you concern with these announcements? Do you see any benefits? Certainly there's on the team side, a big convenience factor. Usually that's like a security trade-off though, right?
It certainly is. So both of these, you think about the Secure Futures initiative that Microsoft embarked upon,
Yeah.
and how that predated the initial recall release, which was supposed to be in May, as I recall. as I recall, let me go to my script.
I was trying not to say it 9 times in the read.
Exactly. Yeah. And so after that, there was an outcry basically from the security community over privacy, and some changes have been made. And part of me, when I heard about this feature, I was thought, I went back to, I was asked years ago, I was participating like in security innovation class and kind of thought leadership, and was asked, what is the perfect like office of the future for you? Like, what would the experience be? And I was like, that I would never have to use my hands, because the computer would be so smart. It would have all my data. I could just tell it what to do, and perfect voice, interpretation, not like what Siri does to me in my text messages all the time. And yeah, that's just very, very awkward. And so when I heard about this, I was like, okay, so they're taking all your data. I'm thinking this is really about having almost like the smartest of smart personalized assistants. I might one day get my office of the future where I don't have to use my hands. But then I thought about, so that's from a functional perspective. Here's what it can do. Here are ways it could be, be helpful. But now I look at it from, what are the unintended uses? And I thought, wow, if I went to like and CEO and said, I would like to put keylogging software on all of our computers, take pictures of everything our workers do, and by the way, be able to mine that data, expertly, like putting basically a data discovery tool on everyone's computer that if a hacker accessed, now they can accelerate their digging. So there's going to be trade-offs on. You're right that you started that way, and this feature still gives me pause.
I just want to say, so Microsoft is a company whose bread has consistently been buttered by enterprise, like big business,
Yeah.
big customers, right? I find it extraordinarily significant that recall is like, it's on consumer hardware. You literally can't buy an enterprise Copilot Plus PC today, even though they have Dell and HP and all their OEMs that could very easily do that. I think this is we're gonna do this as a consumer product, work out all those kinks before we even give this as an option for anybody to mess up on the enterprise side, because we are not we like I think they know they're playing with fire a little bit, but that it's also, there are obvious productivity gains or productivity. There is a fundamental shift that you can have when you have all that information. And I have a feeling that they're willing to let consumers stew in that until they get it quite right to roll out to the enterprise. That's just me just reading the tea leaves on this.
Sure, sure. And on the other story with Teams, that of course we all just read the cost of a data breach report, if you're a CISO, and as well as the Verizon DBIR. And what do we see? Human errors. And when it looked at data breaches, I think it was around like 25% was human error. So now you're giving, that's how data leakage occurring. So not even someone being malicious. It just, to me, I worry that it can make it easier to make those human errors that put data in the wrong account or something, or you forget that this is your workplace and you're in your personal tone.
This one, I'm a little, like, I use Outlook for my email, right? Like the Outlook app. And that makes it extraordinarily easy for me to send something from my personal Gmail, from my CISO Series work account, from, a number of different email accounts. So I feel like there is at least a level of, like, we have apps that do this, that bridge these gaps already, admittedly for like social adjacent. I mean, like Teams was a collaborative messaging, but it has like social elements to it. I feel like we have navigated that before. It still feels a little, I don't know. You're putting a lot more out there. Like there's way more that can go wrong if someone gets access to that. That's my it's obviously, it's the lateral movement. It's the, hey, here's our org chart and here's all of our comms and stuff. Like, that's not great to have out there. But that at least I've seen, we've navigated that before. Recall to me is like, we are in uncharted waters here.
Exactly.
Yeah, yes. That's the difference for me. But still, I don't know. Maybe make it difficult, Microsoft. They're going to be locked into Teams anyway. It's okay. They're not going to
and
slack.
I do want to say I love Microsoft. Like, they wow, change the way most of us work. So
well, we didn't cover this week, but they broke Linux dual boot. So I'm glad to see that. Yes. I'm glad to see that Microsoft is back to hating Linux. That makes me so happy as a old school Linux hippie. That makes me. I'm just kidding. But anyway,
and not a lot of material put out on that right away. Like, getting control of that narrative.
Hey, Tomcat, I see you out there hating on the Outlook app. That is on iOS. That is the best email app. You can come talk to me, Tomcat. I don't even want to hear you.
Anyway, Tomcat has the idea of doxing the developers. So I just
yes, we can
I want
blame
to give
Tomcat
credit
now.
where credit's due.
We can blame Tomcat now. Thank you, Tomcat, for all of your a variety of emojis that we've caused in reaction for today's show. Bethany, before we get out of here for today, was there any story either in our rundown or just kind of the news this week that was that stood out to you, a thumbs up or an eye roll that you wanted to take stock of for a second?
The eye roll definitely goes to the story about ending the bug bounty program.
Ah, yes.
That gets my eye roll.
It's always a weird move. It's like, we've already talked about it, but yeah, ending a bug bounty, it's like the easiest way to, I don't know. The return on investment there is so significant. I don't get it. But yeah. I need to take Google on their word, I guess. Yes. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm not going to pay you to find bugs on Android apps. I will just put that out there. Before we get out of here, Bethany, where can people find you online if they are so inclined?
Sure, I can be found on LinkedIn. So that's probably the easiest.
And are you hiring over there at the Carlyle Group?
We are. We actually have 2 open positions right now, so please, run, don't walk. If you are a highly talented product security or governance, professional, we would love to hear from you.
Fantastic. I hope we can send someone your way, or some people your way. Thank you so much, Bethany De Lude, CISO at the Carlyle Group. Always bringing the great takes, the wisdom, the experience. This has been a fantastic time. Thank you so much for being on the show.
My pleasure, Rich. This was fun. Thank you.
All right. Thanks also to our sponsor for today, Nudge Security. Discover and secure all shadow SaaS. Visit them at nudgesecurity.com, NUDGESECURITY.com. Check them out. Also, thank you to our audience today. We can't always get every single comment up on the screen, but you can tell we're having fun with them. Tomcat, CCL, Kevin Farrell, Ralph Vitchain also contributing there. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us during the show. And tell your friends, bring some people along. We'd love to grow the audience. We'll be back next week at 3:30 Eastern for another episode of The Week in Review. In the meantime, you can still get your daily news fix through cybersecurity headlines every single day. Give us about 6 minutes and we'll get you all caught up. Until the next time we meet, I'm Rich Stroffolino, reminding you to have a super sparkly day.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOSeries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.